Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Jorge's Isolation Podcast. This is the end of the year extravaganza, and I am joined by one of my nearest and dearest pals, Mr. Benjamin Manno. We've known each other for years, but I think the one thing we found ourselves bonding over a table at Chewy's apartment, at the apartment
hmm
there on 28th Ave, is the Twilight Zone. And today, we're going to talk about all things crazy since this has been the craziest year. Mr. Benjamin Manno, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm
How's
super
life?
excited to be here.
Well, you know
Life is
what?
good.
I have to say up front and foremost, and I don't know what I'm saying, but we had tried to get something going with the Twilight Zone about 2 years ago. And
Oh my God, 2 years ago.
it was about 2 years ago. I think we've
Yeah,
been trying to get something rolling, and it's just like the cards never just stacked up. And if they did stack up, they fell or whatever. Like, and we try to get this going, and now we have this opportunity to do this one episode. And if this is a pretty successful episode, I think we should talk about more opportunities like this, because
sure.
this is a subject matter that I think is so relevant today.
hmm
And the Twilight Zone came out in the 60s? Was it 62?
Yeah, late
I think
60s.
68, right?
No, like early. Sorry, late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, it was
Sorry.
like it's as
It
early
kind of
60s.
followed the Beatles albums a little bit,
Yeah,
if you want to get into the early stuff and late 50s
yeah,
into the early 60s. I think the final season was 63. It ended with
yes,
5 seasons. Yeah,
yeah, 5 seasons. So I
yeah,
think it was like what, 59 or 60, and
yeah.
it was a long time ago. And what we're
Yeah.
talking about today is so relevant in
Oh my goodness.
2020. Rod Serling was ahead of his time, but let's catch up, Ben. What's been
Yeah.
going on? How's New York?
New York's great. I mean, as good as it can be, with everything being shut down and the lockdown. But no, I have to say everything seems to be kind of trying to get back going again,
Yeah,
with the COVID going on and everything like that. But I have to say it's sort of that whirling engine is starting to kind of rev up again. The city's definitely got a little bit more life to it, but the hustle and bustle of every day is it's still not where it was back before March hit. It's definitely still a little slower than it usually is,
yeah.
but I have to say it's starting to get a little bit of that life back.
Yeah. No, and
Yeah,
if you've been listening to the podcast or watching the podcast, his fiance Jackie was on, I think, the third episode early on, and we learned about her story about as the shutdown began. She was on a show,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that was like it was one of her biggest breaks in her career, and she was very proud. We're
yeah.
all proud of her. And so we heard that. So if you want to hear that, go back and listen to that episode with Jackie Gian. But what were you doing around that
Oh
time?
man.
um you were
Ooh,
getting, was Boss Labs already happening?
ooh,
Were you already working with
ooh.
you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been working with Chewy for a bit.
A
Chewy
long time.
Gutierrez,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I've been
Go
trying to
ahead
get
and
him on
rep
the
Boss
podcast.
Labs there real
There
quick.
it is,
The
this
little
little
dude.
boss.
There we go. The little boss. But yeah, we've been working on some of those videos for a while now. But when pandemic hit, I mean, I was still stuck in the day job grind, and because
Mm,
I'm a mishmash of a couple of things. I take photos. I'm a location sound recordist. I went to school for acting though, so like I do a little mishmash of everything. But at that point, I was still working for a restaurant group in their
yeah.
finance department. So Friday the 13th hit in
Hmm.
March, and boom, we had to shut down. We were
Yeah.
closed by the end of the week, or by Sunday essentially. So that was it. I was lucky enough to have a little bit of employment through them in the beginning, but
Yeah.
as time went on, things sort of started peeling away as they kind of realized this wasn't going to be 2 weeks like we all thought it was going to be, and then
Yeah.
it wasn't going to be 4 weeks like we were
Yeah.
hoping it would be, and then it turned into 5 months, 6 months, 7 months. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I was blessed and I was lucky enough to kind of hold on to a little bit of that job until it couldn't. But it is what it is. This restaurant industry is really struggling right now. So I
Yeah.
have to tip hats to all of them who are still out there hustling, trying to make it work. Because
Yeah.
especially for us too, it's arts, entertainment, restaurants, any of those like hospitality things that are very much tied to gathering and tied to people
Yeah.
grouping up, which obviously is a problem right now. But it's really hard because you can't really replace that. We can do stuff like this, we can talk over Zoom,
Yeah.
but you can't really do an entire stage play over Zoom and have the audience be say there,
Yeah.
and then have the actors be say
Yeah.
we're figuring it out as we go, right?
As you go, oh man, like you talk about the restaurants right now, and you hear
Hmm.
about, and here's the thing, like a lot of stuff that's in the news is always going to be negative. I mean, you're never going to get any positive feedback from the news, but the whole restaurant situation when they're shutting down the indoor dining and a lot of that, and
Hmm.
they've already put in a lot of money to adapt to COVID protocols, and now this
Yeah.
is just another blow. It's just I don't
Hmm.
I don't know what could actually change it or make it better. You know what I mean? At this point, it's just the rug has been pulled from everybody, from under
Yeah.
and the juxtaposition from over in New York, what you hear about the restaurants and all that, to down here in South Texas, and I'm sure you're in
Hmm.
Dallas right now visiting family, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Restaurants are packed. Packed. I don't I
Yeah.
don't I don't even think that they're even counting people or like
Oh my
capping it.
gosh.
Down here at least. I don't even
Yeah.
think they are, because I've driven by some restaurants and you can see, I've done curbside, and you can see these restaurants are packed, and it's kind of like,
Hmm.
"Oh, okay, that's why we're getting a spike in cases, maybe. I don't know. Um
Maybe.
and I get it. It's a hard time because, like you said, they
Hmm.
need to make a living. That's their
Hmm.
livelihood. Like that,
Yeah.
no one planned for this, and this is really a tough time, man. It's been tough, but
Yeah. But it's I mean,
yeah,
my family's been pretty closed in. My parents, they're over the age of all over the age of 50,
yeah,
or even 60 depending. So I've got grandparents who are all in their late 80s, early 90s, and my mom specifically takes care of my grand. So they've been very, very good about, they don't go to restaurants and they don't go,
yeah,
to gatherings and stuff like that. And so not everybody in Texas is being
yes,
quote unquote irresponsible, but
yeah.
but at the same time it's kind of, you got to think about who you interact with. What
Oh, I
you
know.
do previously is going to possibly affect other people around
Yeah,
you. And but no, in New York, they shut down indoor dining again, so that was definitely a bummer for them as well. And with Broadway not coming back until May next year, indoor type of activities. I
yeah.
can't even go see a movie. I know that's super petty,
It is petty.
but I do miss just being in a dark theater and
Yeah,
being able to have the lights go out in the movie show. And it's
yeah.
that yeah, I know there's a lot bigger things going on in the
There
world, but
are.
that would provide me a little bit of comfort, right?
Well, the last thing I did before the last movie I saw was The Invisible Man, and it
Mm,
was in this. So we have an AMC down here, and it's newer because it was a previous, like it was Carmike theaters before, but then they turned into
mm.
AMC bought it out, and they put one of those Dolby theaters, so the sound system
Oh
just
yeah.
rocked my world. And my buddy
Yeah.
Luis like said, "Hey, you got to check this out. Come with me." So I went with my buddy Luis, and like a packed theater, and it was just a surreal experience for me because I've gone to movies, forever. I hadn't had that experience,
Yeah.
and it just feels like it was like a dream because that happened
Mm,
so long ago. And I think
yeah.
theaters are opened up here. I think they are
Mhm.
open, but I can't trust it. I
Yeah.
can't, especially with
Yeah.
a kid on the way, and I already have another of a little one. I have a toddler who's into everything, and a pregnant wife, and it's so
Sure.
uncertain, and you're getting all these
Yeah.
mutated strains, and it's just crazy to hear about that.
It's
To
the
be
invisible enemy.
It is, and it's just it's so crazy that 2020 happened, and the thing that we're going to talk about today is the Twilight Zone and how
Mhm.
relevant
Well,
Rod Serling was just so ahead of his time. And you know, people say that about other people. Like they'll see a
yeah.
musician and they'll say like, you know, this guy's just such a poet, you know, and then
Mhm.
they write such
Mhm.
poetry and you know, they're so deep. But for me, like I grew up watching the Twilight Zone. It was on there and on the background, and you know, it's a black and white show, so it's a lot of kids
Yeah.
today will not watch it because it is black and white and the acting's a little hokey, you know what I mean? But
It's
the
yeah.
storytelling is still so relevant.
It's 100% relevant.
It's so
I hope
crazy.
it goes back around though to that point, like kids won't watch it. I hope like my little sister is 16 and she loves a lot of things from that time period,
Yeah.
black and white movies. I'm hoping
Yeah.
there's like a vintage turnaround with some of that stuff where people
Yeah.
are like, ooh, it's different because it's not what we see
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. No. And I mean,
Yeah.
Jordan Peele did the reboot, and you know, I had fun with some of it. And other points, I was like, you know, this is a little too woke for me.
Mm,
You know,
mm-hmm,
and it's like I don't mind the woke. I don't mind if you're trying to get a point across, just like Sterling was. There's a lot of, you know,
mm-hmm,
um, there's allegories, you know, or
mm-hmm,
like just hidden meanings to this, or this is just, you know, trying to tell you a story without just hitting you over the head with it. And
mm-hmm,
you know, the newer one was just a little. I don't think the hour-long version worked all the time because you have to
mm-hmm.
fill in that whole hour.
Yeah.
What the 22 page or the 25-minute episodes with the original,
Mm-hmm,
that packed the punch
mm-hmm,
within that half hour. You know
mm-hmm.
what I mean? Within like the 22 to the 30 minutes that show had, it packed a
Yeah.
punch and it left you thinking. So it kept it once it hit its stride, it hit its stride. And even if
Yeah.
there was some any kind of explanation or any kind of like um I'm trying to think of a word, but when there the build up to the actual, you know, first
Yeah.
plot point, you know, the end of
Yeah.
Act One of the episode, you you can see where like it might be slower there, but then it builds up and then it has the payoff at the end of the episode,
Yeah,
which is
the animal.
for me, that's what it was in The Shelter. You know what I mean? There was
Yeah.
like this slower buildup, but you
Mhm.
have to establish the relationships, and
Mhm.
that's what the beauty is. You know, for Serling, and he was a good writer, and he wrote most of these.
One of the best. I mean, really, he wrote a majority of the episodes, and of course, he had a few other folks, you know, like Richard Matheson and
Yeah,
other folks like step in and also write. And some of those people were also kind of in the beginnings of their careers
yeah,
too, you know. And a lot of people don't know that Twilight Zone was a very underfunded television show
hmm
too. They barely got money for some of their stuff. One of my favorite episodes, it's called An Occurrence at Owl Creek,
yes, one of
and
the
it's
most
the silent, yeah,
the
and
best
the
short
story,
stories
it's
ever
so
written.
good.
Yeah,
But it's a French film that they brought, basically purchased
hmm
and aired it through, I guess it was CBS at the time, right?
yeah,
um but they had to do it because they didn't have enough, they had enough money to buy an already made
yeah,
short film and repurpose it, but they
yeah,
didn't have enough money to shoot something that week.
yeah,
That to me, you know, like, and so when people look at Twilight Zone, the epicness, like they
yeah,
were struggling to
yeah,
just get the show to go because like a lot of people struggle with funding for some of these, you know, they can make $1 million TV shows all they want, but
mhm,
some stories like still struggle when they aren't able to get enough, you know.
yes,
And you can see sometimes the quality suffers because of the lack of budget, but there's
yes,
something about the Twilight Zone that they're, you know, even though it, you know, doesn't have all the modern technology that we have, they relied on practical effects, camera tricks, like all of that basic kind of filmmaking tools in order to tell these stories,
yeah.
because they didn't have the means they have now, you know, a couple $1 million just to throw at something. Back then it was the tens of thousands.
Then and they were shooting it in like 3 days, 3 to 4 days.
Yeah.
I've done TV shows and I've had to work for 10 days, you know, and that's, you know,
Yeah.
it's just like, and they're stressed shooting that out in 10 days or, you know, it's stretched out over a month. And it's kind of like to do it in 3 days is amazing. and
Mm.
they didn't have, the kind of equipment, as mobile of equipment as they have now. If you look at lighting
Oh.
rigs and all that stuff that we have now, yes, it's all heavy, yes, there's stuff there, but they had that those antique, lighting rigs and cameras and
Mhm.
dollies and all that, and they built their sets
Mhm.
too. And
Yeah.
that just blew my mind when I heard they were only shooting like in 3 days, 4 days. It's just
Mm.
amazing. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you could do. I mean, I think you can or will start seeing that now. I think what's going to
Mhm.
happen is, because of COVID and because of um the restrictions with the
Mhm.
limitations of how many people you can have on set, you're going to have uh or see an abundance of people being really creative, and they're going to look for
Yeah.
people that can do that sort of stuff. They want to see
Yeah.
let's just let me just sum it up right here. They want to see $1 million production value with
Mhm.
just a couple $100. That's what they want to see.
Mhm.
They just
Mhm.
basically want to, Blumhouse it. They want to have like,
Yeah.
low budget but make it look spectacular. And
Yeah.
I really hope that there's some storyteller out there that will do that. Maybe it's us. I don't know. I don't know. It can happen.
I don't know. It could.
But yeah, man.
Yeah.
So
But no, it was this was all something that I mean, we probably had this conversation multiple times just about
almost every time
Twilight
we
Zone
see
in
each other.
general. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, but no, it comes down to the storytelling and definitely that time, the end of the 50s into the early 60s, there was
Yeah.
a lot going on, and especially the United States. And Rod Serling was a man who served in the military and found an artistic life after that, which I think was probably true for a lot of people at that time because you were
Hmm.
coming out of World War II, people who served
Hmm.
there, served in Korea, trying to find themselves after that, because a lot of his stories are kind of picking
Yeah.
up after the rubble, and that was very much a reality at that time for a lot of folks, looking at Europe and looking at the United States and the civil unrest in the United States and the changes and the growing pains that were happening at that point.
Yeah.
It's very much part of its time, but like we said, you can take some of these episodes, for instance, like The Shelter,
Yeah.
like, and translate that to now, because essentially that episode is what happens when your neighbors who you thought were friends end up
Yeah. Yeah.
tearing your door down, and
Yeah.
just to survive. It's
They panic.
crazy. And yeah, no, because I mean, those were, I think, when we had talked, those were
Yes.
two episodes, The Shelter being one of them, which essentially it starts out, like a normal evening. He's at a dinner, they're having a dinner party
It's a
for
birthday party.
uh
Yeah.
oh, I thought, yeah, because he was retiring from, I think,
Retiring.
being
That's what it was. Yeah. Yeah. The doctor.
a doctor. And so, like, suburban, middle class, they've got a beautiful house, for the time, that kind of
Yeah.
thing, where, in a kid, like, it's kind of that perfect, like,
Yeah.
life. You're a doctor, you're probably pretty well off.
Yeah.
But essentially, they get disrupted by an alert over the radio system saying an unidentified object is heading
All right.
for the United
Yeah.
States.
Well,
Yeah.
hold on. Let me pause you there. So this is the first episode we're talking 2 episodes of the Twilight Zone that I felt that we both felt were pretty relevant
Yeah.
for the year, and this one is The Shelter. So you've already set up,
Yeah.
the shelter for us, the dinner party. Everything is fine. We're joking around, and remember, before you go on about the dinner
Mm.
party and we get the alert. Remember, during this little chat and banter within this party, they make fun of the doctor. He's like, "Oh, you
Mhm.
got your little shelter going on over there. What are you doing with all
Mhm.
those cement trucks and all that drilling it late at night?" And they
Yeah.
tease him about that and forget about it. And then we go on, and then here we
Oh,
are.
yeah. But isn't that ironic? Isn't that what's kind of happening now in some
Well,
ways?
yes, and I
You're
think we can get into like the just let's break down the episode first, I think, and then we can
yeah.
go into like the because I have some thoughts about this too, and it goes back for years. But yeah, continue. So we get the
No, no,
alert.
yeah. So that's what happens. And so the alert comes over, and at that point, in the late 50s and early 60s, you had the scare of the atomic bomb. We had used
Yeah.
it a decade previously to end World War II in some ways, but
Yeah.
we'd used it previously, and the idea of that possibly coming back on us, like there were bomb drills. Even in New York, you see the little signs for fallout shelters
They're
that still
everywhere. That
exist
was
in
one of the
buildings.
coolest things about New York.
Yeah,
I always wanted to see one. Did you ever have you ever gone into one or
I haven't gone into one. I just see the signs on like schools
everywhere?
and on like some houses and some buildings that
Yes.
still have them in the basement because, at that point they thought I mean, that's the best you could do, right? Get
Yeah.
underground and try to put as much concrete between you and the outside world as possible if
Yeah.
something as bad as that were to happen. But this man decided to build a shelter, which I'm sure people were probably looking into at that time. People
Mhm.
who had money or people who wanted to prepare. I mean, nowadays you have doomsday preppers, and
Doomsday
we
preppers.
we make fun of them for the ridiculous. But I mean, it's all fun and games until it
Wh-
actually
What
happens.
a year for them, huh? I tell you.
Oh yeah, they were prepared.
Oh man, this is like they're like, I told you you so moment this year
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
just them like I okay. So for me with the Doomsday Preppers, I found out about that show Doomsday Preppers
Hmm.
and Doomsday Prepping after Hurricane Sandy.
Mm.
And so I started learning about prepping and all this stuff, and I kind
Yeah.
of became more aware of like, oh, maybe I should have some extras, essentials, some dry goods. But this doctor in this episode, he built this shelter. They're making fun of him, and then all of a sudden that alert goes on. He's like, "Oh no, there's an unidentified flying object flying across the town. We don't know where it's going to
Yeah.
land. So you got to prepare." And this is
Hmm.
the part that gets me is that he's like, "Okay, everybody, we need to prepare." So the families all go their separate ways, right?
Hmm.
They're taking their sweet time getting into that shelter. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like we're gonna
Yeah.
fill up water, and so they're getting stuff into his shelter, and they're filling up water from the faucet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the wife is like, "Oh man, the faucet's running really slow." It's like you don't think your faucet was contaminated if you're running from a bomb?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Or yeah, no,
Doomsday
exactly.
prepping. You know what I mean? It's like
Exactly.
that was before we knew any better. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah,
Before we
yeah.
found out what
But
fluoride does to our frogs. You know what I mean?
well, they didn't have Twitter to track it, you know? They didn't have to be
Exactly.
like, "Oh, it's heading this way. It's over New York, and okay, now it's over Ohio," They don't have the immediacy that we have. So I mean, think of Orson Welles and War of the Worlds,
They
like
thought that
people
was real.
bought that
Yeah.
because it was so easy just to buy into. You just heard it on the radio. Every most of the thing you trusted what you heard on the radio, and so
Yeah.
when that happened, like yeah, and people were genuinely afraid. And I was talking about this the other day with somebody. It's like and I don't know about you, but my life, or at least our generation, is very much marked by 9/11.
Yeah.
And I don't know how a lot of people feel, but I sometimes I wait for the next thing that's going to happen. Some people
Yeah.
to think that that think that this virus was purposely done, can use that as an example. But we had 9/11, which was a physical
Yes.
attack. It's not a biological thing that can it has a little more. It's a little more nebulous, but
Yeah.
it's weird. I get that idea of like when could be the next,
Yeah.
occurrence, whatever that is,
Yeah.
who knows, and what will that be? And living in New York City, definitely that's,
I did think about that a lot while I was in New York. Often thought about that because I remember I was there on the 10th anniversary. It was my first year there,
mm,
and man, security was heightened. Just that
yeah,
everybody was on alert that whole
yeah,
day, that whole week, and it was just such an eerie feeling because I wasn't there when it happened. And classmates from grad school
yeah,
were there, you know,
yeah,
and I had a classmate who was there in at NYU, and
mm,
she remembers that, and
mm,
other friends that were in NYC at that time, and it's a
mm,
scary event, and I really pray that it does not happen again,
yeah, yeah,
but we never know. No one
yeah,
expected Oklahoma City. No one expected,
mm-hmm,
San Bernardino. No one expected the Pulse
mm-hmm,
nightclub. Like it's just one of
yeah,
those things. It's like if anything the pandemic has done, it's limited these open shootouts because everyone's been at home.
sure,
You can't
yeah,
make a point. across, with a mass shooting if no one's out or not as many people are
Hmm.
out, which is, I guess it sounds awful, but I guess one of the better things about 2020, you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
And it's morbid to think about, but that yeah, I do totally agree with you. Like, with that being said, is that when would be the next thing? And imagine
Yeah.
coming off of that war with not one but two nuclear bombs that were dropped, and the other
Yeah.
half of the globe pissed off at us. And remember, they said they were located like 50 miles away from New York City.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
the first city they're going to go after
Yeah.
is New York,
Yeah.
and there's
That's what the wife
fallout.
says. She's
She
like,
says we're
we're
50
40
miles.
miles away. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like we're, we know New York's gonna get it. We can't even
we
run.
know you can't run, and so
Yeah.
they're preparing, and then they get the
Hmm.
water, and they
Yeah.
drop a glass. The wife is panicking, which I don't blame her. Like, this has got to be a scary
Oh.
situation. The son. Okay, here's the other thing too. This husband and wife are about 60 years old. Their
And their
son's like
kids like 10.
12. Yeah, and I'm like, good for you.
It's
Like,
really, I think the casting was a little
yeah.
different back
But even the friends at the dinner party, because
then.
we'll see them come back up as we go through this episode. But even the friends at the dinner party are about the same age. They're between
Yeah.
55 and 60. And
Hmm.
they have a baby, one of them, a
Yeah.
baby. And that's a high risk pregnancy,
Oh
back
yeah.
then. So good for them. You go, girl.
Yeah.
Um, but so they're filling up the water, and they're getting the water, and there's a few,
Yeah.
and they're using glass containers, which is really good because there are no what are those chemicals that you
Uh,
have in plastic bottles?
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
But I think more things were probably in glass back then too, like even your
Probably.
Coca-Cola and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like, the convenience of plastic is
Yeah.
ruining it's ruining this country. Yeah.
It's ruining the country. And so he goes back in
Um,
to get the rest of those glass bottles, and guess who's there?
yeah.
One of his buddies.
Oh yeah.
Hey, you gotta let
Asking.
me in, please.
Yep.
Would you let my family in? He's like, no, we've only got enough room for 3 people. And his little shelter was cute because he had like a queen size bed, and then a twin bed, and then a shelf for
Hmm.
like a couple of canned goods. I'm like, where's the rest of your food? How long do
Hmm.
you plan on being in there? And it was above ground too, that shelter.
Oh yeah.
You ever get that?
Was it a well, it was in
It
the
was on the
basement, wasn't it? Yeah.
no, it was in their porch. It was outside of their porch.
Ah,
You notice
see,
that?
I looked at it as like their basement, but yeah, yeah, yeah.
He told a friend. So I think it was that friend that came in. He said, hey, you need to go back to your house. It was, why don't you just go to your basement? He's like, no, we bought the newer model. They don't put a basement in those. So can we just stay there? And he's like, no, you can just stay in my basement. That's what he said. You can
Basement,
stay in
yeah.
my basement. So maybe
Yeah.
he did have a basement too.
Oh man, yeah. But yeah, 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 yeah. So the friend doesn't, because because he got his everything, the modern technology, all the bells and whistles and
All
stuff,
the
but it
bells and
didn't
whistles.
have the preparation for something like this. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's kind of when it begins, is like they one by one start coming over because they know he's got a shelter. But
They made
the
fun of
fact
him.
is they prepped for themselves, and it's an interesting dilemma, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like you have to help yourself, but but everybody had the chance to prep, and that was his point, is like you had the time while you spent out having garden parties and barbecues and
Barbecues.
stuff like
Yeah.
this. I was prepping and building and preparing for this day,
Yeah.
because they set that up too, because it sounds like it's that kind of wholesome block where everybody in the neighborhood knows each other, everybody has
Yes.
parties for each other, celebrates birthdays or anniversaries, all that kind of stuff. Fourth of
All the
July, they
days are fun.
probably
Yeah.
so they definitely painted out like these people are in each other's lives constantly. But when
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 shit hits
shit
the
hits the
fan,
fan. Yeah.
it splatters everywhere, and then more
Yeah.
people, another couple comes in, and then they're I'm gonna pull up my little notes here because I wrote a couple of thoughts. and
Oh yeah.
the other couples start coming
Me
in,
too.
and number two comes in, and the stakes raise because now, okay, so the stakes have risen with the second couple because the children
Mhm,
are smaller. So their argument is that we have a baby and like a toddler. I think that was
mhm,
the age range was. So we're gonna have to fight about that. And they decide that they're gonna try to, like, I guess, hang out in the basement, or trying to figure out what they're going to do.
mhm,
Another family comes in, and they start going after each other and start like trying to accuse each other of this, and trying to figure out who's going to get into that shelter. And the guy's like, no, you all, that's why I think he said you should have like
mhm.
prepared. I cannot have
Yeah.
you in the house. And they're like, you know what, we're going to ram your door down.
Yeah.
And they get a battering
Yeah.
ram. And that's the thing too, his door, it's not the
Didn't
strongest.
seem to
It
it
didn't
seemed to crunch like cardboard.
yeah, it was not a good door. Like, I mean, come
No,
on,
it
doc.
wasn't.
You're a doctor. You could have afforded a better door than that.
Mhm.
At least a metal
Yeah.
door, not like one of those doors you have like in a hallway closet. It's like, come
Yeah.
on, buddy. Like, it's just like it's crazy. And like
Yeah.
they just keep, you know, arguing about who should go in there. And the one thing that people
Mhm,
don't understand, or like that I didn't think about personally, was it wasn't just the food or just the shelter. It was the reason, another reason why they couldn't have another family in there is because of air.
mhm,
They could only
mhm,
cycle so much air, because if you have so many bodies in there, you're going to create all
mhm,
that CO2, or the carbon monoxide, or carbon dioxide, and like it's going to, like, you're going to pass out. You don't have that air circulating.
mhm,
So he was checking the filters, remember, before they got in
mhm,
there, making sure everything was working. And like, people just don't get these things. It's like, we're going to
mhm,
get selfish. We're going to,
mhm.
we need you to save me. And
Yeah.
they start blaming the doctor, saying he's a bad man. And they're gonna ram his door down. And what's cool throughout the episode, you hear like jets going
Mhm.
going over,
Yeah.
and that adds to the stakes for me, because
Yeah.
something's happening, something is going on.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is, but it's going on.
Yeah. Because we feel that in New York when you just hear a bunch of
Oh,
helicopters and you're
helicopters
just kind of
and sirens.
wondering what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like what could possibly be going on? But I mean, yeah, so they're basically drawing straws.
yeah,
It's funny how the other people are drawing straws to go into this other person's
without their
shelter,
permission.
essentially saying who deserves to get batter that door down and go inside.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it when you know it's a joke, but in some ways it's the race for toilet paper at the start of the
that
pandemic. It's
is
these
exactly what
types of
it is.
things where it is very fast that it devolves into every man for themselves, but I deserve to take cover in what you have if you've got something better than what I have. And
Yep.
it's very interesting because the stakes for that are extremely high. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
imagine if a missile were heading towards the United States or one of the
Yeah.
wherever you live, like
Yeah.
the amount of hysteria that'll could take place,
It is.
due to that. I mean, the pandemic caused a little bit of that. We were washing our groceries and
Yep.
not like disinfecting everything, which is still good practice and everything like that. But when I remember when it first started, they were like, oh, you can catch it through this and you can catch it through that, and it's on top of this and it can live on surfaces for X amount of time. And even though it's on surfaces, it's still possible to, in fact, like,
For
nobody knew at
10
all
hours
what
or
was
10 minutes.
happening.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, just hugging somebody, you're gonna
Mhm.
die. And
Mhm.
it sounds outlandish to be that overcautious, but when you don't know, you don't know.
Where
And this happens through history a lot. I
yeah.
mean, even with the AIDS crisis in the 80s, half of that was hysteria because nobody knew what it was. They
No.
just knew it was
And it
killing
was
people.
it was
And
awful, and the way they were treating it was very is unpredictable. They didn't know what was happening. They didn't even know how to name
yeah.
it. It was, they were calling it the gay cancer for a little
Mhm.
while, which is
Mhm.
awful to even like
It's terrible.
to hear. Like I didn't know that until like I worked at that Equinox that was right across the street from the AIDS memorial, and then that
Oh yeah.
hospital where they treated them, all the
Mhm.
AIDS patients, so that like thousands of people were treated in that
Yeah.
hospital, which is now multi-million-dollar condos.
Mm.
That hospital, with that history and all that, they've turned it into multi-million-dollar condos. And I would not want to live there if you believe in like ghosts or anything like that. But
Hmm.
talk about spooky. But
To
I
build
re-
luxury on top of
to
pain.
build luxury on top, but
That's
it's
the
just a
American
slap in the
way.
face, of course. But we're gonna put a nice little monument in a park across the street.
Hmm.
It just doesn't, it's very,
Yeah.
USA. But the way they treated the AIDS victims it was awful at that time. And
Yeah.
even now, like there's the same kind of blame, like, well, you know what, lower class people are gonna get, COVID, or
Hmm.
these people are gonna get COVID. But then
Hmm.
until they get COVID themselves,
Yeah.
it's a different story. And
Yeah.
it's like going back to this episode, when the stakes keep rising, so you hear the jets
Yeah.
throughout the whole thing, then the
Yeah.
alarm rings, and
Hmm.
it says go to your shelters or your basements, because
Hmm.
it seems like it's going to happen now. And that's when the
Hmm.
stakes really raise, and
Yeah.
they get the battery ram, they knock down that door, they're panicking. And
Hmm.
at that point, it was like, if you're going to equate that to what we're going through now, it's like when we're having the largest numbers, and we're going to shut down cities, and we're going to do this and that.
Hmm.
But luckily in this show, in this episode, they have the alarm kind of silenced. They're arguing, it gets violent, there's like a fight
Hmm.
going on.
Yeah.
And the announcer comes back on and says, "Oh, sorry everybody, this was just a false alarm."
Hmm.
And there was just instead of UFOs, which we thought they were UFOs, it was just satellites.
Hmm.
You can go back on to your regularly
Yeah.
scheduled day
Programming.
programming. And if only we had that kind of alert saying, you know what, folks, this was just not real. This is just a
Hmm.
simulation. Hit reset in your head, go back to March
Yeah.
12th, and life is, or I mean, before
Hmm.
you start hearing
Hmm.
COVID, and like we don't have that. But what this
Hmm.
guy saw, this doctor, was he saw what monsters. There's a beautiful line that he has, and I wrote this one little line down.
Hmm.
It says, "I wonder if any of us knows what those damages really were."
Hmm.
The damages that were
Yeah.
happening, because they wanted to pay for the damages of the door. He's like, "Hey, can we
Hmm.
pay for these damages? Well, we'll get the money together. We'll fix your door and your shelter." And
Yeah.
he's like, "I don't think you guys know what the damages really were, because it wasn't
Yeah.
the physical. It wasn't like the material stuff. It wasn't the shelter. It
Hmm.
wasn't. They destroyed his house too.
Hmm.
It was the relationships from the panic."
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
he saw what human beings these people became, or monsters, they
Hmm.
became when faced with this lack of preparation, and
Well, possible death and
possible death.
extreme. Yeah. Like.
He had warned them, to be
Yeah.
prepared for this. And
Hmm.
it was just, it's a wake-up call, because
Yeah.
you do see this sometimes, with people that you thought you knew or trusted, and when they're faced with adversity or life or
Hmm.
death situations, you see some true colors really
Hmm.
come out, and that's
Hmm.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like a caged animal,
Mhm.
that's kind of what it is. Like, you forget that that instinct can override the civilization that we've
Yeah.
created for ourselves already. And in that instance, it's very, very, very startling and very true, because
Mhm.
we're 1 in 7 billion people. And even those other 7 billion people, you have no connection to you, but the story was about friends,
Yeah.
colleagues, acquaintances
Yes.
that turn into that are supposed to be the ones who would understand and maybe have some sort of sympathy or awareness to understand, their own place.
Yeah.
But there was a sense of deserved, um, deserved help, I guess, that they
Yeah.
wanted from him. But at the end of the day, I mean, to each their own. You know,
Yeah.
he did the prepping, but they watched it devolve, and it's really more telling with all of them standing up at the top of the house, like up at the top of the stairs,
Yes.
arguing with each other about who
Yeah.
should go, who
Yeah.
deserves to go,
It's
and
not their
of course,
choice to
as
make.
usual.
Yeah.
But as usual, though, everything plays into it.
Yeah.
Who's got more to offer? Like, I've
Yes.
got children, I've got a baby. The
Yes.
baby needs to survive because,
Yeah.
obviously it's the next generation, not the immigrant,
Yes.
not the
Yeah.
one who comes, like that
Yeah.
boils down to where it's like those true colors, which,
Yeah.
maybe that character had thought about things like that before this
Yeah.
moment, but when it all went to hell, all those things go away, and
Man.
that's what he chose to make that dividing line was based on
Yeah.
him, that he was an immigrant.
Yeah.
And that again, like, that's what's he apologizes at the end. He's like, I'm sorry, things just got
Yeah. We
crazy
just got a
back
little
there,
heated. Got
but
out of control.
yeah.
Trying to
You
make it seem like
understand.
everybody was like that too. This is like, no, no, no,
Hmm.
no, 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 no,
You
fella.
got you got a little, yeah. And so, because by the time they're like, we're gonna get that battering ram, it's like, oh, all right, we're
Yeah.
doing this. Like, it's over. And they go through the house, they knock over the tables, they just, they're on a war path to try to get in there.
Yeah.
But like, he even explained to them, is like, we can't fit it. If everybody fits in here, we're all gonna die.
Yeah.
It's not gonna work. It's just not gonna happen. And that was a reality. But um, nowadays, with things like COVID and the very real possibility of a mass sort of event
Yeah.
that can alter
Yeah.
or harm people in a large way,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, it's not out of the question. We saw a little bit, of it with,
Toilet
the
paper.
toilet paper rush of,
Yeah.
March 2020,
March
where
2020. And here's the thing, man. That happened again when we were
Mhm,
we were told that we were gonna go through another lockdown. I went to the store just to get the baby's milk. And
mm.
during that toilet paper rush, let me just backtrack to like that toilet paper rush of like March and April was they did not only got toilet paper, they got all the paper towels. They
Mhm,
also wiped out the baby wipes. They
mhm.
literally wiped them out. My daughter needed her diapers changed, and we needed baby wipes, and it was so hard to find baby. We went to even Bye Bye Baby, which is just
Mhm.
a baby store, to find wipes, and nothing, man. The shelves were
Wow.
just wiped clean. They're just gone. And it's just
Wow.
of all the things I remember, I took a video, and I might still have it. I took a video of the grocery store, HEB,
Yeah.
that first, warning that there might be a shutdown.
Mm.
And the things that were taken from the shelves were very interesting. Like they took, all the fun meat. They took,
Oh, the fun
like
meat.
cheeses. But like there's tons of pasta. There's tons like
Yeah.
rice and beans. I mean, we're Mexican down here, so yeah, the rice and beans. I understand. Like
Mhm.
we had already a lot of rice and beans, which is good, but like things that you would think that you would need for a doomsday scenario where you're going to be locked down, people were
Mhm.
getting just junk food. Like if it was going to be a party, like a barbecue, like
Yeah.
literally there's no briskets, none. And
My
there
goodness.
was no snack food or anything like that, but there was like shelves and shelves of actual canned goods, soups and stuff like that still on the shelves. So it makes you wonder, like, okay, what were these people thinking? And what's going to happen if we had been in a lockdown situation, or where COVID might have been in that kind of dystopian, kind of
Mhm.
future where food is wiped out. Like they had to
Mhm.
shut down farms, and like maybe COVID infected cows. Or what if that had happened and we don't have meat? What are they going to do for food at that point? What were we going to do? I
Yeah.
started thinking, and you start
Yeah.
thinking about like this whole shelter scenario is like, I have always, like I said, like I always have extra food because of Hurricane Sandy. And that,
Mhm.
week after Sandy, or like, I mean, it was a month after Sandy is when I discovered, because it was like November. I discovered Doomsday Preppers. And,
Mhm.
I always knew like, okay, you got to have extra food. Oh, especially in the Northeast. You never know.
Mhm.
Blizzards, it could be another I mean, you've been in New York long. I remember Ian, our friend Ian,
Yeah.
there was the bomb that went off about 2 blocks from his house on 23rd Street.
Oh
Remember
yeah,
that?
that's
He
right.
was
There
on
was a pressure
21st.
cooker.
Yeah,
Those
in the trash
yeah.
can. Remember, there was that other guy who blew himself up on 42nd Street
Oh
in the tunnel.
yeah.
Remember, he blew himself up. Then there was the car that drove
Yep.
through Times Square. There's always some freaking thing. I remember at one point Rosa was getting off of work, and she was at Macy's on 34th Street, which was her favorite store, and I'm really hoping that it could survive this. But that whole area, in front of Macy's was shut down
Mhm.
because this dude was going after cops with a hatchet.
You're making New York sound really great right now.
But this is like, okay, if you think about these are isolated days, there's
Yeah.
365 days in a year. There's a
Yeah.
lot of New York is crazy. Like you have to understand that in New York City, there's what 12 million people now, 8 million people, nine, just in and out of the city every single day.
Yeah.
You're trapped on this island that's about 13 miles long and like 6 miles wide. I don't know the actual coordinates, but it's just you're in a small island with millions of people. You're
Mm.
gonna get mad
Mhm.
even if you're the most calm demeanored person. Like I know that when I moved down here, moved back here after being in New York, like I'm pretty even keeled most of the time.
Mhm.
There's just days New York will get you, but down
Mhm.
here, man, I felt like Hermione Granger when that little time turner she had. How
Yeah.
you can see everything speed up and you're and then all of a sudden it just stops and it slows down. That's
Mhm.
how it feels when I come back to South Texas and I move.
Oh wow, yeah.
Everything is slow. People
Yeah.
don't take their time driving, except in
Yeah.
some areas they speed. But like for the most part,
Mhm.
like when they're shopping, slow. Ordering
Mhm.
slow. When they want to
Mhm.
get to fixing things, slow. And
Oh yeah.
New York, like you're just constantly on edge. So yes, there's always something happening in New York. I don't want
Mhm.
to say like New York is like the most dangerous place on earth. I mean, it's safer there now than it has been
Oh
in the
yeah.
last 40 years. But you
Mhm.
get a big city, stuff's gonna happen in a big city. I mean, think about the statistics there. You got how many million people there, as
Yeah.
opposed to like I'm in McAllen, Texas, which is like 200,000 people, 300,000
Yeah.
people. There's gonna the odds of something
Mhm.
happening with there's one loony happening,
Mhm.
several million. It's gonna happen.
Yeah. There's
You know,
people pushing people on subway tracks again. That's been coming back lately.
well, at least
I've
they're not
noticed in
slashing
over the
people's
last couple
faces.
months. Yeah. Man, we're this is a great advertisement for New York City.
New
Come
York,
visit.
visit us.
No, I don't think
You
they
get
want
pushed
people
into the
visiting.
tracks. Get
But
yourself a
it's
fucking sub.
hey, it's because I'm walking here.
I'm walking here on the
I
tracks.
gotta get you. But it's true though. Like every time I come to New York, as soon as I get off the plane, I'm always having to be like, "Excuse me," because like the
Yeah.
person in front of me is walking a little too slow,
Yeah.
and then
They're
I
from
catch myself
Iowa.
realizing, it's because I've been in New York for too long, and
Oh
yeah,
man.
that
It's
might be rude.
oh dude, that's the thing. Like I hate it. You always knew who was from out of town when you were walking in New
Hmm.
York. It's like, oh, okay, let's move. I got places to
Hmm.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing. And then, like, yes, there's always something that's bound to happen. And in the shelter, what it also reminded me of, there's this cartoon of like these ants and they're preparing for the winter, and this
Hmm.
grasshopper just wants to have a good time playing his fiddle, and he kept singing this song, oh, the world owes us a living, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. And he would sing and dance, and then the ants would be like, no, we gotta work, we gotta work. And the queen scolds him, says, you need to work, you can't just be playing all the time, you got to prepare for the winter. And he's like, oh no, I'm gonna play my fiddle. Sure enough, the winter hits, and he's freezing. His little, like,
Hmm.
like the back end is like really cool, and he can't
Hmm.
play his violin. The ants are inside their little hole having just a feast, and it's warm and everything, and they see him out there, and he like knocks. I can't remember how it goes, but he ends up being saved by the ants, and they tell him, you better learn your lesson, you got to prepare, and they warm him up, they get some hot water for his
Hmm.
feet and his little
Hmm.
tail, and that was the lesson. It's just like what the doctor was saying. It's like you should have been preparing instead of playing around. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like something was
Yeah.
gonna happen. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
People just, you know, didn't take precautions, and with
Yeah.
COVID, it's unpredictable. We didn't know this. We didn't know that toilet paper was going to be the thing of
Mm-hmm.
all the things.
Mm-hmm.
Toilet paper.
Yeah. It could have been it could have been anything else. I mean, it was a lot of other things. It was a lot of other dry goods and stuff like that. But the amount of hysteria that set in, because of it, and we saw that a little bit though. We saw the supply chains kind of slowly devolve as the essentially the workers, weren't able to go work. They weren't able to
Yeah.
do their jobs, to process the meat, all that kind of stuff. Like you, that was the biggest tell was when the supply chains got backed up for
Hmm.
everything. Like people
Hmm.
talked about Apple products, but really, more simply, more actually, I think more vital is like we ran out of meat.
Ran out of meat. There was a meat
The
shortage.
those plants, they had to close down because I mean those workers and those companies have
Yeah.
responsibility to keep their people safe
Yeah.
and to keep their workers safe. And it led to the general public having a little less of what you usually can find. And I mean, you never take for granted until it's gone. The fact
Yeah.
that you can walk into, in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, at least, there's what, three grocery stores that I can
That's
within like a
that's
10-minute walking distance.
good though. That's not
Yeah,
always the case.
not always the case, but the fact that all of those are usually stocked,
Yeah.
but when it's not, there's usually excess, so
Yeah.
it's just it. I think we're gonna learn a lot of lessons
Yeah.
about how
I think,
things work.
yeah, I think
In a way with the economy, I guess. But
absolutely. And I also think that people, at least for the next couple of years, I can't say
hmm
beyond 5 years because, if we go back to like what you said about 9/11, and,
hmm
I've heard Joe Rogan say this, and I remember this. I was 19 years old when this happened. And when 9/11 happened, there was this sense of just community and everybody was taking
hmm
care of each other and there's
hmm
patriotism. And all of a sudden, like within 2 3 years, that dwindled away and we got to this
hmm
point where we're at now. And like with this pandemic, we're in such a weird state where I think for the next few years we're going to be cautious.
hmm
And as things get better, say this vaccine does work, say that the numbers start going down, and we start getting back on our feet again, I feel
hmm
that people are really going to just get comfortable again and go
yeah,
back to just like living life, and it's just, we're humans, we should
yeah,
live life, and enjoy what we have, and be proud of every moment that we have that we're alive. But I
hmm
think a lot of people are going to forget what was lost during this time, because look, going back to the shelter,
hmm
right? That was off the tail end of the previous 20 or 30 years. So the roaring 20s came before that, the Great Depression,
hmm
the stock market collapse,
yeah,
the Dust Bowl. Then you have World War II. How many people died in World War II? Then you had the
yeah,
Korean War. And
hmm
then that was right before Vietnam started, because Vietnam started, I think, in
hmm
64. So
yeah,
it's right before. So you got back to back to back, and this is when America was like really working hard. We're getting back on our
hmm
feet. And in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, we got spoiled in the 90s, in the early
hmm
2000s.
yeah,
Spoiled. And honestly,
but
I grew
yeah,
up. I grew up during the 90s,
yeah,
and I didn't feel the hardship. Like I saw, I guess, a meme about my grandparent. If you were born in like 1900, right?
hmm
You lived through World War One, the
hmm
Spanish flu,
hmm
the Great Depression. You lived through World War Two, the Korean War. You lived through like
yeah,
the Cold War,
hmm
Vietnam. And if you
hmm
were at least up to that point, 70 years old, 78 years old, you lived through all that hardship. Like for us, what have we lived through personally? And I don't know the kind of struggle that was back then,
yeah,
because even through this pandemic right now, yes, it's as bad as it is, and we're not able to see family, whatever. But I still have access to curbside grocery pickup.
Hmm.
Curbside grocery pickup. Someone gets the groceries and it's safe, but I can pick out organic stuff if I wanted to,
Hmm.
or you
Yeah.
nitpicky about these things. And we have, imagine this, imagine you're going through a pandemic and you can't go anywhere. You're quarantined. You don't have internet or Netflix or video games or computers, anything like that. You're stuck with the people in your house and you have to talk to them all
Yep.
day long or play games or like till the soil,
Hmm.
whatever it is you have to do. And we're very fortunate that, that we have all these luxuries despite all the madness going around. Imagine having a shelter
Yeah.
now. You could put a computer system in that shelter.
Hmm.
And you can have
Yeah.
I've seen some shelters with some amazing air filtration systems,
Hmm.
water systems. They can recycle all the water and like the this top of the line bedding. It's just like you're living in luxury, but it's a
Hmm.
doomsday bunker. That's all it is.
Yeah. You hope you don't have to use it, right? But
Exactly. You hope you don't
it's
have to use it.
there though.
And it's crazy. And there's like companies
Yeah.
that this is what I really started watching the doomsday prepper stuff with this pandemic. And there's a company that will build they build these like kind of like almost like their apartment, but they're buildings, but they're bunkers. And it's a community. And they're selling it for like a
Hmm.
million dollars, like 400,
Man.
500,000 to like $1 million.
Wow.
It's
Imagine you're building a house and it's like I've got a two stories upstairs and then two stories downstairs,
well, dude, if I
like underground.
you better believe if I ever hit a point in my life, in my career, whether, if more than 30 people start listening to this podcast and I get some kind of monetization, I will build a bunker. I will have a shelter of some sort in
Yeah.
I would build, like, I'll buy a bunch of land here, have my house, but then I'll also have the shelter there. Dude, and that's the
Mm.
thing. Oh man, I forgot to tell you about the shelter thing. I was talking to one of my best friends, and this was in April. I would say April. It was very still early on, and we're talking about how crazy it was because I was trying to find milk for the baby. That's what it was.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
he was telling me, he's like, "Yeah, man, if things get crazy, we've got guns. We're good." And we also know this these families that they've got like a little, almost like a little commune, a mini commune, and they have a
Mhm.
bunker, and they're strapped, like almost like a small militia, strapped with like
Mhm.
guns galore. If shit hits the fan, like it's gonna pop off. We're ready. We know we can go bunk with them, and
Yeah.
they got food, they got guns, and
Yeah.
gun sales, man, went up. You can't find any
Oh,
bullets
of course.
anywhere
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah,
find
my
9
brother
millimeter.
is it's not my brother's a police officer, and that's why
Mhm.
they were having short even in the department, they were having
That's crazy.
shortage of yeah, if for them, even it was a problem
Yeah,
because the general public was buying everything up.
yeah,
And that's and he lives in Arkansas, again, a very red state, very, just like Texas, they love their
yeah,
guns. And
yeah,
so, yeah, they were there because they're, they use them practically above, even just as a hobby,
yeah.
it's kind of like in Texas, it's, that's part of gun ownership is, practical use versus,
Yeah.
hobby. But
I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
it's people, we have the right to do that, but that fear that I'm gonna have to defend myself, my family, my stronghold, my
Yeah.
fortress, if you will. Like it's this country was built on land ownership in
Yeah.
the beginning, and
Yeah.
that property was one of the biggest things about America. You could come here and you could own land, and it's your land, and you can do what you want with that land,
Yeah.
sort of thing. And when you strip away all of the technology and all of the I guess civility of living, because I live in a big city,
Yeah.
we don't have much room to spread out.
No.
But in Texas you can have an acre of land and a fence around that land and a house and a bunker and a stable in the back with livestock that you can use to feed yourself.
Yes.
Like you can sustain yourself more
Literally
so than other places.
everything you just said is within 5 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
I take on up my daughter. to look at the cows every Saturday and Sunday
Oh,
morning.
that's so cute.
Yeah, we she just goes moo moo, and
Oh,
within 5 minutes, like it's just 5 minutes from us.
yeah.
We have a neighborhood, but it's still being developed. This whole area, and there's like, you call them ranchettes. They're not ranches because
Hmm.
they're not big enough to be a ranch, but they're just like, there's got a lot of acreage, and man, they have goats. There's like, if you depend on one turn, there's like chickens and roosters like on the road, and then
Yeah.
there's like beautiful longhorns on one side, and then
Oh
you have the
wow.
regular like
Yeah.
big cows on the other side, and then there's horses. Like, it's basically just like
Yeah.
a drive. Like, I drive around, like, looking at farm animals, and it's
Hmm.
like you said, in Texas you can get that, and it's
Yeah.
not, and it's like, it's not far from civilization either, because 5 minute drive you're at an HEB. If you need to
Yeah.
it's like, it's kind of rural, but it's not, and I love it down here. And that's one of the things I'm so glad about, is that when we moved right before all of this all of this
Hmm.
happened, because we have room to grow and
Yeah.
stretch out. Just like I was saying, is like, if you're stuck in a shelter or you're stuck with somebody in a quarantine, you may love
Hmm.
that person to death, but at some point, if you don't have some space between you, you're gonna want to strangle
It
somebody, or
happened.
you're gonna be
It
they're gonna want to
happened.
strangle you. And I nonstop. I talk a lot of nonsense. Like Rosa, my best friend's wife was I guess texting Rosa, or I don't know how it was, but you know how wives talk. And they're saying, like, those guys, like me and my best friend, like, they talk a lot of shit. And Rosa's like, I've known, she's known me long enough to like tune out 90% of the stuff I say.
It's like conspiracy
Yes.
theory through the air, and you're just like,
Oh,
yeah, oh,
oh
what?
man. Like, let
So
me
did you
tell you
did you
about these
actually go pick up
vaccines.
diapers today? That's all I care
Yeah,
about.
no, no. Let me tell you about the diapers. What they're putting. They're tracking our daughter.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
It's, dude, and that's the thing too, man. 2020 is just the year for conspiracy. Year.
but
Oh my.
that but I think that's different than how, we're talking about the age of the Twilight Zone, like
Yeah.
I feel like back then, people took that radio announcement to
Hmm.
heart.
Hmm.
But we have doctors and people talking about this virus and stuff like that, but people still find room to doubt. And I'm not saying you shouldn't question things. That's not at all,
No.
like, we have to
No.
continue to ask questions and be able to search for deeper answers. But you have now where it seems like almost it, it's like I talked about earlier. When you say, no lockdown, no science,
Yeah.
I understand where people are coming from. The lockdown affects businesses, it affects your livelihood. I completely understand. But when you start saying no science,
Yeah.
it's almost in a way indirectly saying no education
Yep.
in some ways,
Yep.
because it's allowing a whole generation of people to be like, if I don't like the way, if science is keeping me from going out and having drinks at a bar this weekend, I'm not going to believe in it this weekend, sort of thing. And
Man.
then, like
Yeah.
we've talked about, you get COVID and you're sick and could possibly be on a respirator, and then
Hmm.
like, it's, are you surprised, like, you didn't trust
Yeah.
the science, and now science is here trying to keep you alive. And that, I think back then, there was still an enamoration with science, and
Yeah.
so people had a love to try to discover this new stuff. And now it's almost, people are like, I'm uninterested, and if
Well,
it's going to affect my weekend, I don't feel like believing in it.
I also feel too, back then, um, we weren't bombarded with information like the internet.
Oh yeah.
So everyone is an expert on the internet. So it doesn't matter. I mean, everyone can be right and everyone can be wrong to some extent. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It just depends on who you're listening to. There's some quacks out there that are totally wrong.
Hmm.
Like at the beginning of this whole thing, they're saying COVID, or was, that doctor, there's those group of Christian doctors, and that one doctor
Hmm.
was saying that there was like, uh, uh, was it demon sperm or something like that? It was, you remember that quacky doctor that was talking about that?
I didn't.
She was saying that if you had like miscarriages or whatever, is because you're messing around with the demons. the demons were raping you or something like that. That's the seed of the
Oh my
demons. Or
goodness.
yeah, it's just some quack. And people were
Yeah.
taking this COVID information from this woman who
Yeah.
was saying these outlandish things prior to that
Mm-hmm.
to heart because it fit their
Yeah.
belief system. Whereas back then, you didn't have the ability to turn on your phone or computer or any kind of news, whether it's Fox, NBC, CBS, whatever, and hear
Yeah.
what they're saying. You got the news, and that was that. That was
Yeah.
that. And then you're like, oh man, well, I hear there's like a UFO out there. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
no, and you hear about the bombs because you knew fact. That's all you hear. It's like the one,
That's the fear.
the
Yeah.
bombs that happened, and you know that there was a war. That's factual, but we don't
Yeah.
know what else was happening. And the government probably lied to them a lot. I mean, that's how you kept things in orders. And like now,
Mm-hmm.
we can question every single thing. And you saw this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
This
Yeah.
whole year was just no uniformity of handling this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy because people will develop their own opinions. Like if you go to the second episode we're going to talk about, the monsters are due on
Yeah.
Maple Street, because
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
cutting on some time here, but the monsters due on Maple Street, I'm going to give a quick little synopsis. Is like it's a
Yeah.
normal neighborhood day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this
Pulling up
episode,
my
like
notes.
people are like washing cars, or they're just playing outside or tending to their lawn or whatever. Then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden something happens, like a meteor or whatever. That's what they assume is happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a perfect episode for conspiracy theories because this happens,
Sure.
oh no, what was that? And all of a sudden, boom, power goes out, lawnmower stops, car stops, everyone starts
Oh.
freaking out, or they're like, what the heck just happened? So, let's just talk, and they convene, and they're talking about, hey, your stuff working? Like, no, 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 it's not working. Like, oh, so what are we gonna
Mm-hmm.
do? And then all of a sudden, there's the group, and then the one guy that wasn't in the group is working on his car. He's like, oh, my car's not working. And he walks over to the group, and all of a sudden, his car working, right?
Yeah.
And so they start saying, oh man, like, it was you're behind, you're the alien, because some freaking
Yeah.
kid. That's what it was that I missed. Some freaking
That's
kid.
that's my favorite part. Is it's
He's
the
like,
kid who
He's like, let me tell you something. They're aliens. They're disguised like us, and they're here to like stop us. Okay.
and all of these adults are listening to this
I was
kid
like,
talk about
oh,
stuff he read in comic books,
a
essentially.
comic book, a comic book. And they're like, oh no, the kid's right. No, maybe this kid is like this. And then they start attacking this guy, and they said, you're the alien. We're gonna watch you. So it's nighttime, and his wife brings him a glass of milk, real hard.
Yeah.
And he's just hanging out on his porch, and they're just out there like
So big
raccoons
glass of
around
milk
trash.
too.
Huge glass of milk. I was like, man, my
Sorry for the segue.
stomach, my stomach got gassy watching that. And the people are watching, like they're hovering around his house like they're raccoons around trash. You know what I mean? It's just like they're all around there. Then they start accusing him of stuff, and then
Mm-hmm.
what happened then? The
So
big guy
they
with
start
the Hawaiian
accusing
shirt.
him. Yeah, but he's the one who starts it. He's the
Yes.
boisterous, loud one. The Charlie, I guess, is the character's name.
Yeah,
But
Charlie.
he starts throwing fingers, and that's what they're doing. They're just sitting there staring at him on his
Yeah.
porch, like waiting for something to happen.
Yeah.
But then he starts talking, talk shit about him, and
Yeah.
then he turns over to the other guy, the main guy, who
Yeah.
the other actor in the show actually. It's funny
Was it
because he actually
Steve?
does play a Martian. Yeah, Steve
Yeah.
plays a Martian in a different episode.
Yes, he does.
Where it's the episode that was then set in the diner where he comes in thinking that they're going to start an invasion, but they realize that the Venusians have already been there
No, he
for
takes
years.
his hat off. It's the third eye,
He's got
Joe
the eye.
Rogan.
It's great. But he
Yeah.
starts accusing him of being in cahoots with the aliens because
Yes.
he's building a radio, because his
Yes.
wife had talked about a radio that he was building in his basement, and then he spends hours down there working with this radio. So
Yeah.
he must be into something nefarious.
Yes.
Because before then, the guy whose car started, he was like, oh,
He's
his
insomnia.
wife was like, I see him standing out in the lawn just
Yeah,
looking up
at
at
the
the stars
stars,
at night, and he's like,
communicating.
is he talking to or communicating to aliens?
Yes.
And so all of that happens basically, and starts devolving into finger pointing. Oh, you do this weird
And the
thing,
lights
and
go on, and Charlie's house, or Steve's
Mhm.
house, but then Charlie, out of nowhere, the gun comes out.
Oh, yeah, well, Charlie grabs it. So basically
Yeah.
what it devolves is, it begins with them kind of in the beginning acting normal, and Keith Van Horn, one of the other neighbors, is like, "I'm gonna
Yes.
go check the other block and see if they
Yes.
have the same problem." And so
Yeah.
he leaves.
Yeah.
And while he leaves, that's when all of this starts, boiling down, where
Yeah.
they start
The
accusing
mob
each other of
forms.
stuff. A mob forms, like the car starts, and then for Steve, his lights go on. He's like, why are your lights on? And so they start basically fighting each other over who's possibly the problem.
The alien.
And as it gets darker and darker, the streets, are empty and there's no light anywhere. They
Yeah.
see that figure coming back, and
And-
as the audience, we see that it's Keith Van Horn, but they don't know who it is. They think it's a monster, and so
Yeah.
he grabs the gun, and Charlie shoots
Charlie
their
shoots him.
neighbor and kills their neighbor.
He was a
Which,
kind man.
it's kind of interesting in the episode how the police aren't called at all.
Well, they're false
Because like it
alarms.
looked like they were just gonna like, go back to their homes at that
Yeah.
point. It's really
Well,
funny.
it's like, yeah,
But
yeah. I mean,
like there's no,
different
like, no,
times.
this is a very like seems like a very secluded block in the middle of a
They
city,
let the
right?
homeowners association handle it first.
Dude. Yeah. And so at that point, the lights go on in Charlie's house, and then the lights go on in somebody else's house, and it's just they're blinking and flashing. And at that point, hysteria breaks out, and they're just running
Everywhere.
around, pushing each other, and just basically like a bunch of frightened,
Kids.
ants in an anthill that is being flooded with water.
Yeah.
It's one of
And
my favorite
it gets
episodes because
violent
it's,
and they attack each other. And people
yeah,
start, it just starts, they just destroy each other's properties, each other, and they go
yeah.
crazy. And then
And then, well, and then
it
essentially
pans out.
it pulls out, and you realize,
It's George
which is my
Soros.
favorite thing about the Twilight Zone, is it always buttons it with that
George
beautiful
Soros.
little ending where, yeah, exactly, it's the new world order coming in
Yeah.
on us.
The globalist and
um
Alex Jones is there. I told you so.
oh man, I don't know if they could lift him up in a in a spaceship.
No, man.
Oh,
Spaceship
I
goes
think
around
there's
him.
he's too much. I think they leave him there.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
my favorite, and I wrote it down because like that's that ending process, like what the aliens are taught. Because
Hmm.
it, like I said, it pulls out. They start moving out as you see below, all the people just scattering, and the chaos happening below, and you realize that it was actually extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
And I wrote it down because it's my favorite thing. It's like one of the aliens is like, do you understand the procedure now? Just stop a few of their machines, their radios, telephones, lawnmowers, throw them into darkness for a few hours, and sit back and
Boom.
watch the pattern. And the guy
They
asked, "And
destroy
is this
themselves.
pattern always the same?" And he said,
Always.
"With few variations.
Yeah.
They pick the most dangerous enemy they can find, themselves. All we need to do is sit back and watch." And
What a
it's
fucking
just it gives me chills
uh
because he's like, "I take this place, this Maple Street, it's not unique." And of course, because they have, alien
yes.
voices that talk like this, and they're like,
Yeah.
"By no means, the world is full of Maple Streets. We'll go
Yeah.
from one to the other and let
Yeah.
them destroy themselves." Because you think about aliens, like,
Oh. Well,
we're so easily tricked
yes,
into destroying ourselves.
and the whole thing at the very beginning was that the aliens were there to destroy them, but the
Hmm.
people that what actually happened was they destroyed themselves. And what a story for
Yep.
2020.
Oh
We
my
how many
goodness.
times did this happen between the pandemic, between riots? Like, if anything, this reminds me of, how messed up that there's protests, peaceful protests. And then all of a
Hmm.
sudden, these conspiracy theories and these outside sources came in and started turning these
Hmm.
peaceful protests into something that was violent. And there was
Hmm.
riots and there's
Yep.
random bricks being dropped off.
Yeah.
And that happened
Yeah.
here in South Texas. Like, here's the thing: like,
Yeah.
there was a point where they were going to have a Black Lives Matter protest, which is fine. They want to be in solidarity with the country. And
Yeah.
for the most part, we don't have very many Black people. Like,
Hmm.
very few. Like, now, since I've
Yeah.
moved back, I've noticed we have a lot more, which is we actually
Sure.
have culture down here now. Like, there's more than just Mexicans and a couple of white people. Like, we have
Yeah.
bunch of different cultures, which is beautiful now. It makes me
Yeah.
feel a little, it made the move back from New York a little bit more easier. for me to
Hmm.
transition to, because now it's like, okay, I'm not going to be thrown into just a culture shock again.
Yeah.
Like there's, oh, it feels like I'm in my old neighborhood. There's white
Yeah.
people in my neighborhood, because in Jersey City it was like 90% Indian, and there's a couple of black families in my neighborhood, and I was like, okay, this is cool. But anyway, there was random
Yeah.
bricks, pallets of bricks being dropped off in downtown McAllen. What are they gonna rob and riot? It's downtown
Down
McAllen.
the
There's nothing there.
there.
Like, what were they planning? Like, I don't know if these riot planners were like trying to say, we're gonna sabotage this protest and we're gonna start a riot with what? And you know what we
Yeah.
got out of that? National attention, because a dude pulled out a chainsaw and chased some kids off of the sidewalk in downtown McAllen. Did you ever see that?
No, I didn't,
I gotta
but
send you that video.
I'm
This
sorry
guy,
I'm laughing. It is funny though.
it's awful. It was a guy who owned like a landscaping company. But of course, dude, there's so many landscapers down here, obviously. But it's racist. But it's not. The stereotype is true. We work in our yard. I work so much in my yard this year.
Mhm.
But there was a landscaper with a chainsaw ready to
Yeah.
go, and he's chasing these kids off, and he was just spouting off such racial slurs, the n-words, and it's like, stop believing them, with the heaviest accent on earth. It's like,
Yeah.
Latinos for Trump. They're like, stop believing them, stop believing their lies, there's nothing going on here. And it's just like, dude, like, what are you doing? And there's memes already, like the
Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it had him, and it,
Oh my god.
it was crazy. And then you have
That's
all this random stuff happening.
yeah. Yeah.
Like, even like there was, those random bricks, or like random people showing up to start breaking windows when there was nothing.
Yeah.
It was just, this year was so full of chaos, and we didn't
Yeah.
know who was with who. And like, even protesters were seeing like these random people, and they were stopping them from breaking stuff. Did you ever see that? Like, like these like little
Yeah.
like skateboarder kids trying to break windows at Nike, and like, the people were actually there for the cause. It's like, hey, listen,
Yeah.
black lives are being taken
Yeah.
wrongfully, and you're doing this.
Yeah.
Why are you ruining our movement? Like, this is
Yeah.
what causes problems, is
Yeah.
people like you trying to loot and stuff, and they're stopping it.
Yeah.
Such good
No.
people. And
And knowing a lot of conservative people, they use all that as an example to
oh,
devalue the protests and
yeah,
devalue the movement and
yeah,
devalue those things. And it's because it's true. Like, I'm not saying it's, okay to riot or do any of that, but you have to look at it. A lot of those people are coming from out of town. A lot of those people were
yeah,
opportunists looking, and it's the Joker quote, but some people just like to watch the world burn,
they do.
and that's an opportunity to do it. It's
And
an open opportunity.
we're coming
So
from a time that, how many weeks were we already in a lockdown?
yeah.
How many people had already lost their jobs at that point?
Yeah.
How many people were already bored and had nothing to do? You didn't have a
Yeah.
school to go shoot.
Yeah.
Like, it was just like this. Like I said, that was one of the things I was glad that it hasn't happened this year. No mass shootings,
Yeah.
but you still had some really violent episodes that happened.
Hmm.
And when people were
Hmm.
storming into neighborhoods, or even, if we're going to bring it back into like the neighborhood watch sort of thing, like,
Yeah.
I had a situation, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. We put on up out of bed, and our lights went out on our block, just our block. Like, across
Whoa.
the street, you can see everybody had their lights on. The
Whoa.
Christmas lights were all on, but our block was just dead. I walked around the whole block, and this is where I think I got the idea of this
Yeah.
episode. And I was like, oh man, this
Yeah.
reminds me of that, because this happened in Jersey City during Sandy. And
Yeah.
as Sandy happened, Rosa and I were walking around our neighborhood when we didn't have electricity, and I was telling her, I was like, you can see these people. We don't have electricity. We can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
We're stuck here in Jersey
Yeah.
City. And I said, give it 2 or 3 days and stuff's going to happen. I just
Yeah.
feel it. I could see it. People are getting bored. And
Hmm.
sure enough, within the next day, we had a curfew because people were starting to get robbed left and right
Oh my gosh.
at
Yeah.
gunpoint,
Uh,
and, that's the thing. That's the human nature.
yeah.
We get bored if we don't have our machines, our gadgets.
Yeah.
Even back then in the episode, they had lawnmowers, or
Yeah.
working on their cars, or whatever
Yeah.
they have. We're left to our own devices,
Yeah.
and we
Mm.
start the mob mentality, just like in the shelter.
Mhm.
But you start
Yeah.
this went out of control, and you throw in a
Mhm.
pandemic on top of that. How many different stories did you hear about COVID, and all these different like theories about COVID and the vaccine? Obviously, they're going to plant chips in us, and they're going to, like,
Mhm.
I personally, I don't trust the vaccine, but it isn't because of conspiracy theories. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I don't think they're going to plant a chip. And if they do plant a chip in us, it's inevitable. It's going to happen at some point. You know what I mean? I mean, whatever, we're going to have that. For me, it's
Yeah.
kind of like when you get an iPhone, you wait, till, they work the bugs out of the first model, and then you get the
Mhm.
second one. You know what I mean? You want
Mhm.
to see what works, and what you want to get the next version, because the
Mhm.
first one's always going to be glitchy. So that's
Mhm.
that's my thing. But if I have to take the
Yeah.
vaccine, then I'll take it. I know several people.
Yeah.
My best friend's sister-in-law was like, the first person in the valley to take the vaccine. The very
Ooh.
first.
Wow.
Yeah,
Cool. Yeah.
she's
Yeah. My
alive.
brother
She's fine.
got vaccinated this morning, so
Good.
like it's rolling out to essential people and it's getting
Yeah.
out there. So we'll see. Time will tell if this actually really does take hold and it works. And we don't end up with like we have now in the UK with mutations and stuff like that. We're
Yeah.
back to square one sort of thing.
They
But hopefully we're not back to square one because we already have something that works.
what they're saying though about that mutation is that the vaccine is pretty good against that too.
Cool. Yeah.
And the mutation, all it does is it spreads faster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like going
Yeah.
back to like the whole, I joked about George Soros thing, but like
Yeah.
those people, they were always kind of like, who's pulling the strings for some of these violent outbreaks? Like who was
Mm-hmm.
shipping in these people that weren't from the city to start havoc?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's George Soros.
Well,
This is not a conspiracy theory
no,
podcast
but
yet,
no, it's
but
not. But yeah.
there's always something happening. You know
Well,
what?
that's why I wanted to read the ending narration for the episode, that episode in particular. I
Yeah.
think because the shelter, it's a very like it's a great episode that kind of talks about these things, but it's very much unique to that certain circumstance. Like a particular thing, like if there was nuclear fallout. But I
Yeah.
think the implication of monsters are due on Maple Street is a
Yeah.
little different. I'll just read the ending narration real quick,
Yeah.
and
Please
it's
do.
this is Rod Serling. The tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices, to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill and suspicion can destroy, and thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout of its own for the children and the children yet unborn. And the pity of this is that these things are not contained to the Twilight Zone.
Dude, he's such a master.
But that is the point. You talk about George Soros in one way, and like it's not conspiracy theory, but the idea that they did destroy themselves,
Yeah.
and it was not through
Mm-mm.
a large event. It wasn't through a 9/11. Like you look at how that even brought people together
Yeah.
more so. But we live in an age of so much disinformation that these types of
Yes.
things, like those explosions, those atomic bombs, aren't necessarily causing nuclear
Mm-mm.
fallout. It's disinformation through Twitter. It's
Yeah.
disinformation through Facebook and social
TikTok.
media and the internet and TikTok,
Yeah.
like all these things. It's much more subversive, and
Yeah.
to me, that's what that tells me is it's in thoughts and prejudices
Yeah.
and attitudes. Those prejudices can kill. Like that
Yeah.
that thing it's real, and it has, and it's always done that. But
I
even now, so more so than
Yeah,
ever.
absolutely, more so than ever. And just think about it. We talked about this at the beginning. There was no social media. You just said that
Hmm.
through TikTok and all that. Imagine had that situation played out today.
Hmm.
I got addicted to TikTok, and
Hmm.
I'm dealing with that addiction to TikTok, but it's entertaining. I found like several
Hmm.
cooking videos, and they have the
Hmm.
For You page, and there's
Hmm.
awesome cooking barbecue videos. Like, it's just amazing. I have dad talk. Apparently, like your algorithm, like, the
Yeah.
lumps. I have dad talks, a bunch of DIY projects and barbecue. But
Yeah.
apparently, there's like a lot of conspiracy theories, and it's like on both sides. So it's
Hmm.
both like conservative and liberal conspiracy theories. And the amount of views, like you can see how many, obviously you can see how many
Hmm.
likes and views and shares. It's incredible how people can
Mhm.
piece things together that
Yeah.
that they do seem legitimate. They do seem legitimate, but
Mhm.
how legitimate are they? Because on the other side of the spectrum, like say if you're a conservative and you
Mhm.
found like, A plus B equals C,
Mhm.
they will say on that's the conservative side, on the liberal side, well, it's C plus B actually equals A. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And there's just very convincing information. And
Yeah.
what has really helped the conspiracy theories was knuckleheads like Alex Jones who just spew out all sorts of shit, just like
Yeah.
all the stuff on the wall and sees what sticks. I mean,
Mhm.
when he talked about the fluoride turning the frogs gay, everyone made fun of him. And then they found out this year, actually, it wasn't the fluoride, it's the pesticides that they use for poisoning bugs and insects were
Mm.
actually changing the genders of frogs from male
Yeah.
to female. They were
Yeah.
changing their actual, biology. And so,
Mhm.
like, okay, Alex Jones. And then the whole Epstein thing ended up being
Mhm.
pretty true. So you have people
Yeah.
like him with stuff happening like that, then everyone's going to believe every conspiracy, or they're going to,
Yeah.
you can, if you want to create a conspiracy about every little thing, you can. And there's
Yeah.
people who just eat it up. And
Mhm.
it sounds awful to say this, but it's also like a lack of education too, where you're gonna be a little bit more gullible here and there, but at the same time, there's just very educated people that also believe in really weird things too, and it's a
Yeah.
very conflicted world we're living in
Yeah.
because there's so
Yeah.
many thoughts and beliefs. I mean, if you go to New York, they're gonna talk shit about the flyover states. I remember when Trump
Mhm.
won, like, oh, those flyover states, they're all racist and bigots. And then if you
Yeah.
come over to the flyover states, they're like, oh, those idiot liberals in New York
That's it.
City. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
they both have valid points. I mean, I hear them out. I have seen how it is, but then they're also fed all sorts of bull
Oh
by
yeah.
by whatever media outlet that they watch. And
But
it's
that's not media. Well, I mean, it is social media, but that's not media.
yeah,
And then you have, but that goes to my point with the ending narration.
yeah,
It's, that's the type of fallout that happens when you don't report news anymore and you
yeah,
report only opinion, or you report the opinion that, you have to remember the media companies are companies. They're selling
yes,
you a product. Ted Turner created CNN with the idea of creating a 24-hour news station
yeah,
that people can consume. It's consuming a product. You're buying their product.
yeah,
And that, I think, that became very clear too with the election as well, is that the media doesn't,
yeah,
you know, call the presidency. It doesn't,
no,
just because they project to somebody to
yeah,
win doesn't mean that they will. And
yeah,
I think a lot of people are starting to understand the processes of how some of these things actually work,
work,
instead
yeah,
of just like thinking, oh, the system just kind of happens. And
yeah,
so that's been really great, is to educate people on how these steps actually go. But you have to remember, they have their own story that they like to sell.
yeah,
And so when people stop trusting that because they've been either dishonest or they haven't necessarily told the truth completely, they start looking towards other channels. And those channels sometimes even are more radical than your news stations.
yeah,
The things that don't go on Fox News but
yeah,
ended up on Breitbart or
yeah.
ended up on like
4chan.
Newsmax, or some of these, yeah, 4chan, even
Yeah, I didn't
considering
even
that
know
as a news.
Newsmax was a thing until the election because
Yeah.
Fox News turned their back on Trump at some point, and
Hmm.
so Newsmax was the thing. And you have all these other news outlets, and it's just so crazy um, that you read all this stuff, and it's just like they're even like on CNN or I forget what other one, like they'll post a story and then they'll have a conflicting story about the same topic,
Hmm.
a few weeks
Hmm.
later, and it's just kind of like make up your mind. What are you trying to sell here?
But that's what yeah,
And Fox
it's
News does
it's
it, and I'm just saying like CNN was
cognitive
for the time. New
dissonance.
York Times is the one that does that all the time,
I,
and they've lost so much credibility in the last 3 years. The New York
yeah.
Times has, and it's a crazy world that we're living in with that. Um, but I forgot what I was going to say. There was something else I was going to say
No, no,
about
no,
that.
yeah.
Oh man, Geez, I'll think
losing
about it.
credibility and
Losing
losing
credibility. Oh no, I just thought of something. The New York Times just posted a story, and this has nothing to do with conspiracy theories or anything like that. It's
mhm,
a really
mhm.
cool story that was posted on New York Times. The article about this lady in Mexico who went after the cartel that killed her daughter.
Oh, I saw that.
Cool story,
Yeah,
dude. I
she
told
killed like
Rosa,
40 people.
yeah, and got a bunch like arrested or whatever.
Mhm,
And I told Rosa the day it came out, because I remember we sent it to our friend, Raul Castillo.
mhm, yeah.
He's like, was it? I remember him saying, was this online or in print? And I said, it's probably both, and it was both. And so that was a couple weeks ago, the day it came out. And I told Rosa that day, I was like, man, how many movies of this is going to come out? Sure enough, yesterday, guess what? Blumhouse won the bidding war for this movie. Blumhouse. I love Blumhouse. They have the
Money
potential.
making money.
Money, you know what I'm saying? It's just like I told Rosa, this was in a week because this happened a week ago. This story
Yeah,
came out a week ago. There was a bidding war within a freaking week for this movie. And I
I
knew there
love
was
our
going to be a
industry.
movie. It's just like
Mhm,
how many pandemic shows are going to come out now? How many pandemic stories? I know for a fact I read for a TV show that was like a series regular at that point at the
mhm.
beginning before pre-pandemic. It was I did all right. I don't think okay, let me just be honest. My tape sucked. It was bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
it
I
happens.
got I got called in to read, I mean not called in, but to do a tape for the same
Mhm.
show, the same exact show, but they knocked it down from series reg to recurring guest, which is still good.
Oh, I mean, it's good,
But
but yeah, yeah, it's not.
But I have to say, they made the most of their time with this pandemic because it was the exact same scene, but they cut it from like a page and a half to one page. And it
Mm,
was so much stronger. And they threw in the pandemic in it, but just
mm,
like a little pepper in there. It wasn't
yeah.
about the pandemic, but the pandemic added to the story, which was lucky for
Mhm,
them. And I think a lot if people can use the pandemic as kind of like a background layer for
mhm, mhm,
storytelling instead of it being the primary source, like, yeah, I lost my whole family due to the pandemic. Feel sorry
mhm,
for me. That's gonna be
mhm.
you're gonna see that or a bunch of zombie stuff.
Yeah.
You're gonna see a whole bunch of zombie movies coming out.
Yeah.
But
Mm,
that's the one thing about this pandemic is that we got is some,
mhm.
that's what I'm thinking, like is story stuff like that. But anyway, like I went off topic there because I just
Yeah.
thought about the New York Times and that movie that was coming out. I was just wondering if you had heard that news.
Yeah, no, I saw that thing and it's just I didn't know that they were making a movie about it though.
No,
I
no,
knew that they were, yeah.
it was official
So
yesterday that Blumhouse won the bidding war. They're going
that's
like, and there was
crazy.
like I would say like 8 or 9 different studios bidding for it, like big,
Yeah.
like they saw this as like your money maker. It's so amazing within a week, dude.
Wow.
A week.
Wow.
And I'm kind of wondering, like, man, what do I have to do to get a movie made?
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
that's
how,
that's
how many
that's
how
part
many
of
of us
it.
have stories and then this one? And it's a fantastic story. I just
Yeah.
really hope, because Blumhouse is the studio I want to work with. That is the
Mhm.
one. And actually, the people are petitioning for one director to work with them and on this because she's worked with the Blumhouse before with Culture Shock on Hulu. And she's a Mexican, so she knows the area, she knows, the tone. So Blumhouse has the potential to go one of two ways. Either they go campy teen slasher, or they can go like the Whiplash way or the Get Out way,
Mhm.
where it's
Mhm.
very craftily done. And I
Yeah.
think with the project like this, I really hope they go in that direction. You know what I
Yeah. I mean, we'll wait for 2022 when it's finally out.
mean? Unless they shoot it like in a
Wherever will
month.
be.
Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah.
know,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
What
yeah.
out of this, so with these two episodes that we're talking about,
Yeah.
you should check out this book called with my guest that I had on a few episodes ago, Mike Bakoven wrote
Yeah.
a book called Fantastic Land. I told you to read it.
Yeah.
Read it. Read it because you will see like a little bit of both monsters and shelter. Monsters do on Maple Street and shelter. There's,
Yeah.
there's little you can see little hints of both of those in that book. It's so good, man. Like it's
Oh,
just
that's awesome, dude.
you read that, and also if you want a good, you know, dystopian kind of like in the world situation, The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay, who's the previous
Yeah,
guest. Read that.
yeah.
These are good, you know, tie-ins to the show. But people, if you haven't already, this show has been out for 60 years. Like 60
Get
years.
on it. Get
I
on it.
didn't even give a spoiler alert. You should have watched this and have an
Yeah,
open mind when watching these shows, these
yeah,
episodes, because yeah, the acting might be, you know, that old 60s, like, well, what are we doing today? I'm doing
yeah.
fine. But,
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
story is what really sells it, and it
Yes.
stay with me. And these are two episodes that can play into the pandemic, and like how he, I'm not gonna say he foresaw, but he just saw the world around him, and he
Hmm.
painted this picture, and he disguised it within like a sci-fi, you know, scenario for both
Yeah.
of these. But you know, there's so many. What was that one episode that you told me to watch, and it was about the guy who was an ex he was a soldier, and there
Hmm.
was the Asian, he was like Korean, or was he?
Oh, he comes. I think it's called a quality of mercy. It's because
Yes,
he's a American soldier who meets, I think, a Japanese
yes, Japanese,
veteran, and it's the sword.
the
It,
sword.
it has to deal with the sword. I haven't seen that one in a while, but I'm pretty sure somebody gets killed in it.
And it's one of those
Yeah,
like they took our job sort of
yeah,
scenarios. You
yeah.
know what I mean? And it
Or
was,
they were the enemy
they were the
too.
enemy. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that just
yeah,
still plays into today with immigration. And
yeah.
Serling was very ahead of his time. And I
Oh yeah.
really, you know, I'm glad that we were blessed with 5 seasons. And there was a lot of
Oh
episodes.
sure.
There's
No,
a lot of
it was
episodes,
a lot.
like 30
Because
episodes.
each season was about 20 some,
Yeah.
yeah, which is a lot for back then, even though.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's really great that we're able to kind of explore and dive down. And I think it's important to kind of look at some of our sci-fi writers from that period of time, because we're living in the time period they were writing about
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah. Yeah, there's
yeah.
no flying cars and stuff like that. But we've had alien sightings. We
Yep.
literally have had alien sightings. Of
Yep.
all the 20 things that happened in 2020, we had the pandemic, we had murder hornets, we had, you know, riots, protests, but also like the dark underbelly of like maybe there's puppeteers that are controlling riots and like destruction and mayhem and terror. And the new thing too is they're saying that the government is wanting to like crush the businesses so they can start over. You know, there's this whole like
Mm,
globalist theory that, you know, the reasons why they're shutting down restaurants is so that they can take over and control us
mm.
in a socialist state. You know, there's that theory.
Uh,
Then we had the UFO footage released by the Pentagon. You know, there's Bob Lazar, you know, saying I told
mm,
you so. There is just like so much happening, you know, and then the election, and then all this tampering with the election, and you know, ballots and all this other stuff. And then, you know, we still got a few more days, and
mhm.
then we have this huge bill that was passed for the COVID relief. We're getting $600, maybe 2,000. They're
Yeah.
revoting. I think they're going to vote again
We'll
because
find we'll find out.
Trump, you know, Trump, people don't agree with Trump, and I don't agree with Trump ever. And then he's like, you know, $600, it's nothing. You know, we gave
Yeah.
everyone else in the world. And there was a
Yeah.
tweet that came out from 2014. He said, "It's like I hope we don't discover life on other planets because the U.S. would probably give them money too." That was in 2014, and that, of
Of
course, is
course.
circulating right now, making Trump the
Of
hero.
course.
But it's just, you know,
Whatever.
I don't know what
Yeah.
to say, but it was such a crazy year, and you know,
Yeah,
I'm
man.
really glad we got to chat and catch
Me
up. It's
too, dude. I'm so
been,
happy we got to talk about this stuff.
oh man, I think we're gonna do this again. I
Yeah.
really enjoy talking about the Twilight Zone, and there's so many episodes and so many themes that, you know, just relate to different aspects of life. And
Hmm.
you know, like there's that one where the guy, I saw this, I was going through the episodes today, you know, the one with the
Hmm.
prisoner.
Hmm.
He was alone. What is it called? It's like something to be alone, and he gets
He
the
was on.
is in a
Yeah, yeah.
prison by himself, and they give him a female robot as a companion. I was like, Rod, little did you know there was going to be love dolls, robotic love
Oh yeah.
dolls in 2020. Like that's a thing right now.
Yeah.
So It's crazy that
Yeah.
that stuff is happening. Or there was that one that we talked about, where there was the saucer that crashed, and they go into the diner, and people are accusing of who's the Martian,
Hmm.
and then it ended up being the Venetian.
Yeah, that they're already there.
They're already there. We already took over, and there's like
So
four
crazy.
arms. Remember the guy pulls
Yeah,
jagged, he has the four arms. There's so many great
great.
things, and it's all hidden behind either minor horror, but mostly sci-fi. And that was the
Yeah,
beauty of the storytelling, because you can get these lessons while being
yeah,
entertained, and it's not
yeah,
overtly like beaten over your
yeah,
head.
yeah,
It makes
yeah,
you think. It gives you a better worldview about things. And I think we should do this again, very
yeah.
soon.
I
Talk about,
agree. There's
yeah,
too much to talk about.
there's too much to talk about.
It's almost
It's too
too
many
much.
things. But Ben, thank you so much for joining me today. Can we find you on social media?
Yeah, dude, I'm on a couple of places. So
Name them
I
all. Name them all.
my so on Instagram at Ben Jammin since the '90s. It's my just first name since the '90s. And then I also do 35 millimeter photography, and that's on Love in 35 millimeters.
Yeah,
So
11:35 minutes.
I'm starting to update that page with some of the snaps I've been taking.
They're
But yeah,
beautiful.
that's where
They're
people can
beautiful.
find me. Thanks, dude. Thanks for having me.
And
This was
you
a lot of fun.
and you make those videos with Boss Lab. I mean, if you compare
Yes.
the videos that they do and the videos that I do, theirs is much, much prettier. My video quality is just like low. And whenever I needed like really good video work or anything, and my best buds there in New York, Julian, Ben, and you do amazing work. And I hope you guys get to 200 followers, subscribers this weekend.
Yeah, dude.
You're on your
Thanks,
way.
man.
You're on your way.
We're yeah,
And
already on that way.
and I gotta be honest. You all gotta check out his baking video on the Boss Lab. It has nothing to do with tech or
I do
videography,
bake.
but you should do your own YouTube channel baking and talking about stuff while you
Hint,
bake.
hint. I might. I might.
I'm telling you, dude. I told you this when that came out. I was like, you're onto something. I think you should do it. You have the Martin Scorsese look going, young Marty Scorsese. And it's that beard too, man. You and
Mm,
I both, we have eyebrows for days.
eyebrows.
It's the eyebrow cast and the beard. So you know what, man? I miss you.
Thanks,
I
man.
miss hanging out,
I
and
miss you too, dude.
it's hopefully we'll get
You
to
know,
hang out
when
soon.
we'll get to hang out soon when, we all get the able to
We'll
visit the RGV again and all that kind of stuff.
get
We'll
the
we'll make
chips
something
implanted
happen.
in us
Yeah.
to track us. Uh, anyway, you can always follow the podcast on Instagram, because I don't do Facebook. It's Instagram at Jorge's Isolation Podcast, and the YouTube channel is just Jorge Chapa. You can see my pretty face. There's episodes there and videos and just a whole bunch of randomness. Please check it out. Go ahead and subscribe on YouTube. I'm on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. It's Jorge's Isolation Podcast. Leave nice reviews. Thank you for listening, everybody, and watching. This was the end of the year extravaganza. And you know what? We're going to kick off 2021 in a much bigger way. And please be safe. Thanks for this great year. And, I appreciate every single one of you that have listened, all 28 of you that download every week. Those 28, 30 downloads are just, better than zero. So I thank you. And 2021 is going to be even better. Thanks for watching and listening, and have a safe and blessed new year. And let's make 2021 count. All right. Have a good one.